It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Howdy, y'all. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Thank you for being here. It is my honor to guide you on this magical mystery tour for the next hour or so. We've got some really good, fun topics coming up today. Later in the show is an interview with David Fitzgerald and Dana Fredsti, and we're going to talk about their new book that's coming out in June, just a couple of weeks now. A continuing of their three-part, it's the third part of the three-part Shadow Wars series. Some nice, light fiction, sci-fi, kind of messed up world stuff. You'll get a few hints about the stories in the interview. I highly recommend the books if you're looking for something a little bit different, some escapism, great stuff to read. We will also talk about some other books that both of them have written in the past and maybe some future works that you might find interesting. So we have that coming up. Today I'm going to have three pieces, again, of Robert Green Infersoll. It's from his famous writings and speeches. This is called About the Bible, Part 3. And to make it digestible, I've broken it up into three sub-segments that will be in order at some point throughout this entire show. So hopefully you enjoy that. The emails that I've gotten about it have so far all been very positive. I'm delighted everybody likes this. And again, this is a product of CFI, the Center for Inquiry. And you can go to the CFI store and buy the CD, a double CD actually, and then there's a little link that after you buy it, you can go download the MP3 files. I'm going to see if they can find some way to get this on Amazon or something where you can just buy the audio file and not have a CD shipped to you if you don't want that to clutter your house or if you don't want to have that plastic and metal be wasted. So that's stuff that's coming up in the show, and it's going to be good fun. Oh, I almost forgot. Well, I did forget, now I remembered. The Investing Skeptically segment is going to be on bonds. We're going to talk about bonds and which bond funds I'm currently using for the cushion. So if that's interesting to you, that's coming up after a little break here in our first part of Ingersoll. But before I go to that, a little randomly different side story kind of thing. We finally got some trees planted in our yard last fall. Unfortunately, they came pretty late, right before the freeze, maybe 4 or 5 weeks before the ground froze. So, of course, the trees are all bare. There's no way to know if they're alive or not until spring comes. The thing that's weird is I have been trying to get trees on our property for the entire 4 years we've lived here. And, of course, I wasn't trying that hard, but I would get someone to come out from a nursery or from a landscaping company. We'd talk about the trees that are options. They would give us suggestions, counter suggestions. They'd have to go do research to see, because if you just want a tree, that's easy. But if you want a specific tree, it gets complicated. And only some nurseries have this tree or that tree, especially if you want hybrids. And so they would talk to us, they would throw out numbers of prices, and then they'd ghost. And I wouldn't get trees. And I'd try to reach them, and they wouldn't respond. And then a few months or 6 months later or a year later, I'd try again. So we finally got a nursery to come bring trees. And we put in a northern red oak in the parkway between the sidewalk and the road. Closer to the house, a really, actually a tall, big tree for for a nursery to come deliver to a home, which is what I wanted, by the way. It's a hybrid elm. I don't remember the specific name of that elm, but it is supposed to be resistant to elm disease, which has wiped out a lot of elm trees. So we are very excited to have an elm tree in our yard. And then along the side of the house, we've put in 3 Corinthian lindens. And the nice thing about a Corinthian linden is that they are columnar. They grow up in a column kind of thing. As long as you trim back the lower parts, it'll have a good bare, tall trunk so you can walk under it and around it without, a lot of brush in your face. And then from that point up, it may eventually grow to have a diameter of 10 to 12 feet, but it'll grow up tall enough to shade my office. Now, I'm not going to get any benefit for a couple of years, but my office is on the very south end of the house, and it just kind of sticks out. It's like something added on to the side of the house. Well done, tactfully done, but it gets sun in the morning and midday and the evening and all the way into late day until the ginormous autumn blaze maple that was planted in '03. Huge. We have 3 of those in the back. Absolutely adore those, but we wanted to have some different types of trees around the property. So that's what we got. But the one that was having trouble was the northern red oak in the front of the yard. And I didn't know if it was the cold, because the leaves started getting very droopy and kind of not as green as they should be. We're trending towards a light green / yellow. And we had some cold and some freezes, but it's a northern red oak, so it should be able to handle that. Didn't really look like it had any insect infestation or things like that. So I started doing some research and actually contacted a nursery, and they were really cool about it. And their suggestion was that I was overwatering it, which is the kind of funny, because I was following their watering instructions, because you don't want to plant a tree and then have it be dry. But apparently, because the hole for the tree was dug into our yard, which is mostly shitty clay and gravel mix, you get this effect where the tree and the dirt and the root ball and the dirt around the tree is basically sitting in a clay bowl. I mean, literally like a bowl. And so the water that you add in doesn't go anywhere. That's nice if the tree likes a lot of water. The northern red oak does not like a lot of water. So the nursery said, stop watering. And I even took the additional steps of removing all of the mulch around that tree that was there to keep the water from evaporating, so that the soil would evaporate and the water would evaporate out. And I actually kind of dug a little trench far enough out around the tree to just a couple inches, hopefully not to disturb the root ball at all, but again, to allow more air an inch or 2 further down into the soil to help it dry out. And then I supplemented the soil again with a recommendation from the nursery for adding iron. Iron is necessary for trees to create chlorophyll. And when a tree is not as green as you think it should be, one of the things is it could be short in iron. So just some fun tree stuff that I've been learning, and I thought I'd share that with you. It's kind of a weird thing, because even though our neighborhood is almost 20 years old, in the Midwest, when they build these neighborhoods, they're taking farmland and converting it to neighborhoods. The first thing they do is they scrape up 1 to 2 feet of beautiful, luxurious, thick, black earth that is the best growing materials in the world, and they sell it because they don't need it for the construction process. They get all this money from that dirt, and then they dig a hole for your basement, because those are very common in our area, and all of that clay and gravel then gets spread around the property. So sometimes they do nothing to augment that at all, and they'll just lay sod on top of the clay, which means you are now compelled to water your lawn in the summer, or let it not only go brown, but often die. Grass is pretty hardy, but it's becomes close to putting sod on concrete, trying to get it to grow. So that's part of the trouble I had with the tree. And a lot of trees in our neighborhood get planted, and then a year or 2 or 3 later, they're dead, and they pull them out, and they do it again. And you eventually get, from the death and decay of enough grass and or trees that you've killed, now stuff can start to grow in the soil. It's really, really kind of a sad way of treating the environment and the property. But what am I going to do? I'm just me. So we're going to take a quick break. Robert Green Infersoll, as recorded by Center for Inquiry, from an actor reading Robert Green Ingersoll's writing, hopefully in the style of Robert Green Ingersoll, about the Bible, Part 3, the 10 Commandments. And of course, this will be Subpart 1, and then later Subpart 2 and 3 during this episode. And enjoy.
Section 3. The 10 Commandments. Some Christian lawyers, some eminent and stupid judges, have said and still say that the 10 Commandments are the foundation of all law. Nothing could be more absurd. Long before these commandments were given, there were codes of laws in India and Egypt, laws against murder, perjury, larceny, adultery, and fraud. Such laws are as old as human society, as old as the love of life, as old as industry, as the idea of prosperity, as old as human love. All of the 10 Commandments that are good were old. All that were new are foolish. If Jehovah had been civilized, he would have left out the commandment about keeping the Sabbath, and in its place would have said, "Thou shalt not enslave thy fellow men." He would have omitted the one about swearing and said, "The man shall have but one wife, and the woman but one husband." He would have left out the one about graven images, and in its stead would have said, "Thou shalt not wage wars of extermination, and thou shalt not unsheath the sword except in self-defense." If Jehovah had been civilized, how much grander the 10 Commandments would have been. All that we call progress, the enfranchisement of man, of labor, the substitution of imprisonment for death, of fine for imprisonment, the destruction of polygamy, the establishing of free speech, of the rights of conscience, in short, all that has tended to the development and civilization of man, all the results of investigation, observation, experience, and free thought, all that man has accomplished for the benefit of man since the close of the Dark Ages has been done in spite of the Old Testament. Let me further illustrate the morality, the mercy, the philosophy, and goodness of the Old Testament.
Last episode, I talked about bonds, specifically long-term bonds, and how they can be affected with interest rates, and maybe a little bit about how interest rates can possibly be pushed upwards from pressure of the fear of inflation because the economy is growing. Interest rates now are at historic lows, so it's kind of a cautionary tale. And I got a listener wrote me an email right away, and I thought, oh my God, I should cover this. And so I'm just going to kind of read parts of the response I already sent to the listener, and they'll know who they are. And thank you for the kind email, and hopefully my response helped. In their cushion, they are using one bond fund, Vanguard's Total Bond Market Fund. And one of my thoughts is, no, this is a bad idea. And it's one of those things, again, it is, on a scale of 1 to 10, is this total bond fund from Vanguard a good thing to use or not? Well, part of the answer depends on your situation. If you are 12, 14, 15 years away from retirement, and you're only just starting to build a cushion, and you want to be really efficient with your time, and you don't want any extra hassle or work, fine, use this fund. That's VBTLX, Vanguard Total Bond Market Index, Admiral Shares. It's fine. It's not a problem at all. If you are getting closer to retirement, or if you're in retirement, this can turn into being something, at least at this time, in 2021, a pretty shitty thing to own. Downright concerning to me, because it violates some of the things that I do, or suggest or recommend. All right, let me just get into it. As an example, if you have the Vanguard Total Stock Market bond fund instead of the 6 funds that I recommend, and I'll go over them, I hope, later in this segment. If the stock market takes a shit, the stock market goes down 50%, and you have one bond fund, that's the only place you can pull from. That one bond fund. And I just pulled it up here on Morningstar, as you know, my favorite website to go check things. Year to date, this fund is down 2.6%. A bond fund that's down 2.6%. And part of it is that this bond fund has a reasonable portion of high-risk bonds, junk bonds. It also has a generous portion of intermediate and long-term bonds. And that's the part that right now scares me the most. Because a very long-term bond paying a phenomenally low interest rate, if interest rates go up a point or two, you can lose a lot of money in bonds. And this portfolio is trying to cover all bonds. That's what it does. If that's what you want, you're fine. Fucking ignore me and do what you're doing. It's not a big deal. But it has bonds that are 6, 8, 10 years out, 20 years out. And the effective maturity in this fund as a whole is 8.5. I want under 5 right now. And if you're a little conservative, maybe a maturity of less than 4. And that is related to the duration and the effects that interest rates, rising interest rates, can have. If we had record high interest rates like 7, 8, 9, 10%, this is not a problem. So this advice might be different several years from now. It might be different if 20-year bonds or 30-year bonds are paying 8%, I might buy a whole bunch of them. I might put a whole lot of money. I might even take money out of the stock market just to put them in high-interest bonds. But that's not where we are today. Today, we have record low interest rates, huge amounts of money coming from the government, and I think it's a good idea that that money is being spent to prevent us from going into a coronavirus recession. And I think we're past that. But a lot of money is coming into the system, and it's going to keep coming into the system. And that prevents a recession, and it stimulates the economy. That's the good part of that. If you overdo it, interest rates can be tempted to go up. So I don't want the extra 0.5 percentage point of theoretical return in a bond fund if I'm subject to losing 5, 10, 15, 20%. So I have that problem, is that it has long-term bonds in there. The other thing that's a basic problem is that, and I like to use the words clarity and granularity. You don't know exactly what allocation and what types of bonds you have, because it's just the total bond market index. And through Vanguard's website and through Morningstar, you could dig into that, but it's going to be some work, and it still might not be very clear. So you lack clarity. But probably the bigger thing for me that is a problem is that you lack the granularity to be able to go pluck out whatever you want to do. This last year, the stock market did wonderful, especially when you measure it from March 31st of 2020 to March 31st of 2021. But even calendar year 2020, the stock market as a whole, measured by the S&P 500, up 18.4%. Absolutely fantastic. But if you have a year where all the stocks are down, and if that same year the stocks are down, interest rates happen to go up 2 points, 20-year long bonds might lose 20, 30, 40% of their value. And you don't want to be selling that. You didn't really even want to own that, but you don't want to sell it. If you have the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund, because it contains a generous portion of short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term, there is a possibility, and we can use the 8.5-year duration or 8.5-year to maturity as a guide. If interest rates go up 2%, this fund could theoretically lose something like 16%, 17%. Now, it might not be quite that way because it has so many different bond funds, so it's not going to be a one-for-one correlation. But if that's your only bond fund, that's supposed to be your cushion. And now stocks go down and your cushion goes down 10, 15%. It's an extreme theoretical, but why subject yourself to that? So if you use a variety of funds, and again, the granularity, the ability to pick and choose, because if you look at the 12 months ending March 31st, if you're just looking at the bond funds that I use, the bond funds that I recommend, the trying to stall while I get to the page. Here we go. The junk bond fund made 18%. The emerging market bond fund made 14%. But the total bond market made 0.5% 12 months ending March 31st of 2021. And like I said, it's down 2.6% year to date for this calendar year. So if you had half a dozen different bond funds, maybe one of them is up, even if everything in general is down. And of course, this creates a systemic process where you sell high and buy low. You can't do that if the only thing you have is one bond fund. It's really convenient. It's really easy. And it's not even horrible. I just think you can do better. And so a quick summary, I have two categories of bond funds that I'm using currently. One is very short term and very low risk and very low return. The yields on these really conservative funds are about, 0.5%, 1%? Yeah, 1% or less. But I think that should be probably 75% of your cushion, because the cushion is meant to be there to protect you. So I want it to be really safe. So those three funds are VBIRX, Vanguard Short-Term Government Bond Fund, VFSUX, also Vanguard Short-Term Corporate Bond Fund, and VFIJX, which is a Ginnie Mae stock fund. And that one does have a little bit longer than maturity and maybe even longer than my general guidance. But those three bond funds should make up 75% of your portfolio. If you have a slightly different Vanguard short-term index or bond fund, fine. If you're using Fidelity or Schwab or some other company's short-term bond fund, cool. I'm good with that. I'm actually more concerned about having only one fund than I am that insisting that you must have the funds at Vanguard. You want to have the bulk of your cushion in very boring, very conservative, short-term, low-interest bond funds. I know it sounds so awful, and it is, because you're only going to make percent or less at this point in time. And even those funds, if the yield is 1% and the average maturity is 1 or 2 years or 3 years, you could get 1% in dividends and then lose 3% in valuation. But it's a couple percent. So we want to have that stability for the cushion. The other part of the cushion can be maybe up to 25% of the cushion. I'm currently using 3 different bond funds to try to take risks in some other places, not in long-term bonds. One is the Total International Bond Index, VTABX, the Emerging Markets Bond Index. I think that's VGAVX. And then going back to domestically, the High Yield Junk Bond Market Fund, Index Fund, whatever. Can't get my words tripped up. And that symbol is VWEAX. And there is some overlap between the Total International and the Emerging International, clearly, but all three together are less than 1/4 of your total cushion. And you might get a situation where the stock market goes down, safe bonds go down, international bonds go down, and you look and you say, hey, because this is what happened the 12 months ending March 31st, the high yield bonds made 18%. And so if you need money out, that's the one place you go to. Even if you liquidate that total position, you can always fill it up later. That's great. You're selling a winner. You're selling high. You don't want that to be too much of your portfolio, because high yield bonds can, in a bad year, under the right conditions or the wrong conditions, depending on how you look at it, suddenly lose 15-20% in junk bonds as well. So it's a small piece. But these small pieces have sometimes move in different ways from each other. And so with that granularity, you can go in and with a scalpel and take $10,000 or $20,000 out of that one position, assuming you have enough money to do that. So that even if 90% of all investments are down, if you have one that's up, or if you have one that's at zero, or if everything is down, you want to sell the one that's down only 1% or 2%. You want to pick the best one. So that's why I use different bond funds. So the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund is fine. It is what I like to try to say, it's suboptimal. If it's only 5% of your portfolio and you're just starting to build a cushion, whatever, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. But in retirement, I recommend the 6 funds that I just went over. If that went too fast, let me know. I can send you an email back with the list. It doesn't matter that it's exactly these 6 funds. I'm not as picky as I am with the U.S. stock market part because there's a little more sloppiness between bond funds. But 75% of your cushion should be pretty darn conservative at this point. So hopefully that helps out some other listeners. If you have specific questions, you may send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com.
The story of Achan. Joshua took the city of Jericho. Before the fall of the city, he declared that all the spoil taken should be given to the Lord. In spite of this order, Achan secreted a garment, some silver and gold. Afterward, Joshua tried to take the city of Ai. He failed, and many of his soldiers were slain. Joshua sought for the cause of his defeat, and he found that Achan had secreted a garment, 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold. To this Achan confessed. And thereupon Joshua took Achan, his sons, and his daughters, his oxen, and his sheep, stoned them all to death, and burned their bodies. There's nothing to show that the sons and daughters had committed any crime. Certainly the oxen and sheep should not have been stoned to death for the crime of their owner. This was the justice, the mercy of Jehovah. After Joshua had committed this crime, with the help of Jehovah, he captured the city of Ai. The story of Elisha. And he went up thence into Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head. And he turned back, and looked at them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tore 42 children of them. This was the work of the good God, the merciful Jehovah. The story of Daniel. King Darius had honored and exalted Daniel, and the native princes were jealous. So they induced the king to sign a decree to the effect that any man who should make a petition to any god or man except to King Darius for 30 days should be cast into the den of lions. Afterward these men found that Daniel, with his face toward Jerusalem, prayed 3 times a day to Jehovah. Thereupon Daniel was cast into the den of lions. A stone was placed at the mouth of the den and sealed with the king's seal. The king passed a bad night. The next morning he went to the den and cried out to Daniel. Daniel answered and told the king that God had sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. Darius, being then a believer in the true God, sent for the men who had accused Daniel, and for their wives and their children, and cast them all into the lions' den. And the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the pit. What had the wives and little children done? How had they offended King Darius, the believer in Jehovah? Who protected Daniel? Jehovah. Who failed to protect the innocent wives and children? Jehovah.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
It is now time for the dynamic duo. I've got two guests today, David Fitzgerald and Dana Fredsti, and they are good friends of mine from conferences over the years, and they also are both authors, but they've now come together on a new trilogy, which I have already, well, I didn't read them. They were read to me, audiobooks, but the third one's coming out in like days. So David and Dana, how are you guys today?
We're good. It's so great to be here. Long time no see, Phil.
And when does this book come out, and what's it called? Let's just get right to the meat and potatoes to start with, and then we'll have some fun.
This is book 3 of our Time Shards trilogy. It's called Tempus Fury, and it drops June 8th, 2021.
If you hear a weird noise in the background, that's one of our cats who wants to be part of the podcast, just FYI.
Cats are like that.
Yeah. It's an occupational hazard here.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You're literally surrounded by 10 cats and a dog as we speak.
Yeah. Now, we know regular listeners, I guess longtime listeners, because David has not been on for a while. And Dana, I'm thinking, this is your first, but maybe I'm wrong. David, you have been at conferences and you've written some books about religion. Can you rattle those off so people might find those interesting, can go buy them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Most of my nonfiction is about Jesus and the historical Jesus question, whether he really existed or not. I have a book called Nailed, 10 Christians that show never existed at all. And then there's a follow-up trilogy called Jesus, Mything in Action. I also have a book on the Mormons, and right now as we speak, I'm working on a book about sex and violence in the Bible.
I know we've talked about that idea because you've done a presentation, and I can't wait. When does the sex violence Bible thing come out?
As soon as I can finish it. It's one of those things like it's either going to be a very short book or it's going to be a monster book, and it's somewhere in the middle at this point.
Yeah, I just thought of that title. It's kind of like Eat, Love, Pray. It's going to be Lie, Rape, Bible or something like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
That'd be the sub.
And David, I don't know if you're willing to disclose. You write another genre of books. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, it's been a while. I'm not sure if any of them are in print. But,
okay.
So it's probably not worth going into. But I did have a short career as an erotica writer for a while there. But we'll save that for another episode.
Fair enough. So I'll transition skillfully over to Dana. And, of course, Dana, I have you up on Amazon, and there's a whole bunch of books with your name on it. So what's going on, and who the hell is Lilith?
That is my current series. It's the first book was called Spawn of Lilith, the second Blood Ink, the third that I am trying to finish even as we speak. I'm thinking about it even as I talk right here. It's called Hollywood Monsters. And it's basically about a stunt woman who is the descendant of Lilith, and wacky hijinks and mayhem ensue. So,
stunt woman by day, demon hunter by night.
Yeah, it's a dark urban fantasy with humor, which is basically it's a horror series with humor. So, yeah.
Fair enough. And so, the spawn of Lilith is the character in the Bible, like Genesis kind of Lilith.
We're talking Lilith, the mother of demons, the first wife of Adam, and there's also other, incarnations of her that sort of inform the backstory. So
fair enough. And is this you on all these covers?
No, but it could be in my youth. Yeah, I did a lot of modeling for comic books back in the day, so there are pictures of me and my butt with swords. Yeah.
And that's how I met your mother.
That's right.
Yeah, very nice. And of course you have another series, Plague Town, and what was the other one? Plague Nation.
It's the Asgard series, and it's Plague Town, Plague Nation, Plague World, which basically it should tell you what order to read them in, and it's kind of like Buffy meets The Walking Dead. Same thing. The genre is called dark urban fantasy, but it's basically horror with humor running through it. So
very nice. So are you working on TV rights deal?
The TV rights basically belong to Titan, and I've got different people shopping them in different places. I wish that Titan would shop them more, but yeah,
there's some whisperings in Hollywood as we speak.
Yeah.
Wow. That's my psychic powers kicked in there, apparently. And
we're not holding. We'll see.
Yep. And so talk to me about Shatter War. It's a joint production for both of you. How did it come about, and where have our characters gone, or is that like too much information?
Well, the first book, Time Shards, it came about because Dave and I were driving home from Comic-Con, I don't even know, like 5 or 6 years ago, and he was telling me about RPG tabletop game that he developed, and basically it was about what would happen if the timeline was basically a loop where every moment that ever was always is and always will be, and what happens if that shatters and comes back together all cattywampus with, basically little bits and pieces of all of the different time periods that have ever been, and what fun it would be to do stuff with that. And when he told me just the basic concept, the hair on the back of my neck rose, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a great idea. We need to write it. And so, I originally thought, this would be a really great YA series, and then it turned out our agent felt more comfortable shopping it as
adult. Well, not adult.
Not adult as in, no watch on there.
Over 18.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's actually perfectly acceptable. I mean, when I was a kid, I would have read that series and eaten it up. It actually is, I think, pretty much anywhere. If you were a kid like I was at age 10 that liked a lot of gore, from age 10 all the way up, it's perfectly suitable for them.
Yeah.
Of course, there's mothers out there probably going, no!
Well, it's funny because I think I want to undo what you just said. I don't remember it being particularly gory, at least compared to the other things I see on TV.
True. Well, there's a few people getting chopped in half here and there.
Yeah. That's bound to happen in any good story.
Not everybody makes it through the end of the book.
Yeah. But I actually think that for the kind of kids, especially nowadays, who play video games, I don't really think there's an issue with the age there.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to market it specifically as YA.
Right. Because YA kind of has their own tropes, and this we didn't want to. We didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the right call. I think this is definitely a book that's designed for adults. But the well-read 8 and 10-year-olds could easily manage it. And
I do.
Go ahead.
It's a trilogy. Time Shards was the first, Shatter War the second, and the third one that's coming out is Tempus Fury. So it actually is a trilogy in the true sense of the word, in which there's an overall arc for the series.
Yeah.
Each book has its own arc. The things that have to happen to bring the end of the book to fruition.
Right. So you don't want to jump around. You definitely want to read it in order.
Yeah, I think so.
Otherwise, you'd be completely lost. I would be completely lost if I was trying to read that.
Well, I would just want to read the rest of them. If I read the second one,
Fair enough. Well, I know I've enjoyed the other two, so I have high expectations for the third one that comes out June 8th. Do I have that right?
That's
yes,
right.
You do.
Right.
When does the audiobook come out?
That's trickier to know, but we let Tantor know that it's...
Tantor has the book. We have our narrator, Aaron Shedlock, who is amazing. Absolutely. He's really, really good. I think that he and Ray Porter are the best narrators out there, especially when it comes to dealing with a bajillion different languages. So we really are lucky to have him. Yeah. Hopefully it will be out sometime soon.
Usually it tracks about a month or two after the drop of the book, but they may have had a jump on it this time.
Yeah, so. It just depends on their schedule, but
exactly.
We'll let you know as soon as we know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'll have to have that inner struggle of, do I actually get it and physically read it, or do I wait?
Yeah, that's tricky too, because there's pluses and minuses to both ways.
Indeed. Indeed.
So I think everyone should buy the audiobook and the hardcover.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah. And the ebook.
Yeah. So that way you have it in all three formats.
That's really the only way to do it.
And of course, the big distributor that has the same name as a river, They play little games, as I'm sure you're well aware, that if you buy like the paperback for like $1, you get the Kindle version, so you can read it on paper and Kindle, but you guys don't get revenue for both units. I mean, you get dramatically reduced revenue, but
I not even to think about that, because that is therein lies madness, because we get so little money from each book anyway.
It's true. But that said, if you want to order it from your local bookstore, that is what we recommend.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you have one still.
If you have a local bookstore, yes, by all means. And if you don't, there's mail to you.
There's Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego. There's Borderlands in San Francisco. There's a good science fiction bookstore somewhere near you. Yeah, absolutely.
Wherever you are.
Yeah, and I don't think that holds true for New Lenox, Illinois, but
well, by mail, if not by.
Fair enough. Yes, because bookstores, independent bookstores, are pretty much in the category of use it or lose it, because it's tough competition out there.
Absolutely, but all the more reason to hook it to the local beloved bookstore and see if they can order it for you.
Yeah.
So hopefully I don't give too much away, but the time shards. So you have characters with different plot lines, and they meet and unmeet and go on their separate ways. All the good pieces of a good story, but unlike something like Doctor Who, where there's a machine that allows the characters to travel to different locations and different times, yours are basically on a grid of the Earth, and a few feet over there could be 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, or it could be a different part of the planet, different climate, different characters.
Yeah, the way we set it up is that the Earth, it's really kind of a post-apocalyptic series in a way, because now the Earth is made up of all these giant jigsaw puzzles pieces, and the pieces came originally from different times, as you say. So, like, here's a chunk of swamp with tyrannosauruses in it. Next to that, there's some knights in shining armor.
It's not a different part of the planet.
Yeah,
though.
that was one of the rules we did stick to ourselves. Is we didn't let it's not totally hog wild. We wanted to be geographically centered. So if you're in England, you might see King Arthur, you might see Winston Churchill, but you're not going to see Genghis Khan.
Unless Genghis Khan, was in England at some point.
Yeah.
But we
wanted to give a few corners just because that gives it more juice. It's fun to play with the limits of that.
For instance, like, if you have characters that are, say, on a boat in a river when things go wonky, you can all of a sudden have part of that river in modern day and part of that river like a billion years ago.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you're going to have both the geographical elements of both time. Yeah, the terrain. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. So there's some interesting adventures that our characters get through. And the other interesting part about a scenario like this is all our characters come from different times. So it's like two of our main characters are a girl from San Diego, modern day San Diego, and a boy from, a young man from first century Celtic Britain. And the entire first book, they don't speak a language in common. So it's a lot of fun to see how the characters interact with each other, how they see the world, how their different perspectives help and hurt each other.
Excellent. Well, like I said, I've enjoyed the two so far, so I'm very anxious, waiting for the third one, and it's coming out just in time for my birthday, so I know what I'll get myself.
Hooray.
Yeah.
Well, not to spoilers, because I hate spoilers, but I will tell you this. In book 3, in all the books, the spread gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So, like, the first book was mostly in one country, second book was in a bigger area, and the third book is kind of all over the place. So
nice.
It goes some very strange places too.
Now, I know it's a trilogy, and you're about to release the third book, but will there be a fourth part to the trilogy?
It's funny. There's a couple throwaway lines where something happens, and they mention it in passing, or it's part of somebody's backstory. And when we were plotting all this out, we thought, you know what, we could write a whole book just on that. So we're not going to rule that out, but there's a lot of books in the pipeline between now and then. But there's definitely some standalone ideas we could do.
Yeah.
And
we can also carry on the characters that we've got right
Sure.
now. It's just
Sure.
we'll just sort of have to see what happens.
Yeah, see how much traction the response gets.
Yeah.
But it's a very fun idea, and it's one of those kind of endlessly fun ideas. You could just go to new places and it'd be different every single time. There's lots of fun to be had in this series.
Excellent. You guys got any conference plans this year, or are you just kind of waiting and see still?
Yeah, Comic-Con was probably our biggest convention for this kind of thing, and everything else we've done has been virtual so far.
Yeah, and probably will be at this point. I mean, yeah, because even or StokerCon, which is another one that we've gone to a lot, they're doing virtual this year. I think that 2022 is going to be when we start going back to conferences, because we still have so much stuff to do here.
Interesting fun fact, 2022 will be the negative 200th anniversary of the event that kicks off Time Shards.
Ah, well, there you go.
The schizochronolinear apocalypse that destroyed the time.
Very, very nice. Yeah.
Hashtag schizochronolinear.
That's right.
Excellent.
He made that up.
Yeah.
I like that.
I want to circle back for a moment, David. This whole Bible sex book thing. Give me an example. Give me an example of what that might contain.
Well, if you've heard my story, Sexy Violence, Violent Sex, the Weird-Ass Morality of the Bible, that's kind of the nugget that it starts from. What I'm trying to do is not like do an encyclopedia of all the sex and violence in the Bible, but I kind of want to do like a curated version of the best of not just the sexy bits and the violent bits, but the weird bits that don't make sense according to the way the Bible is supposed to be, by Christian standards and by Jewish standards, and just try to give some perspective on why is it that we have this story in the Bible, and why is it saying that, and who wrote it, and do we know when these were written, that kind of thing. So it's a tricky book to keep small, but I think it's going to be packed full of really interesting stuff, whatever makes the cut. And it's the kind of book that when I'm done, I think there'll be lots of room left over for other books too.
Ah, very nice. I just popped in my head, I don't know if you'd even consider it, but maybe in the back few pages you can outline how you can use the book for a drinking game.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's awful laughter.
So yeah, that can be a convention favorite where they all bring out their copy of the book and follow the rules in the game and have a grand old time.
I'm literally writing that down.
Literally.
Not
literarily writing it down.
Yeah, exactly. Hat tip to Phil Ferguson.
Hat tip. I'm thinking 10%.
I go crazy.
10% of next to nothing.
Too funny.
Yeah, that's great. Dana, what are you doing after these other sequences with Lilith and her friends? What's your next project, or do you not know that yet?
I am going to take a couple months off to just sort of regroup and let my brain bleach out, because I've been writing every year since 2007 and working other jobs, and I'm frankly exhausted. I mean, I do events and marketing for a local history museum, which I love. I also do proofreading and personal assistant work for a best-selling author, which I also love doing that. I'm not sure what I want to do next as far as my own writing. So I've got ideas. I've got some ideas. I just want to sort of spend a couple months doing nothing but reading and walking and drinking wine and letting my brain decide what it wants. And Dave looks like he's got a thought.
Well, I was going to say, that said, we do have a story that's going to be in the new issue of... Oh, can't mention that yet? Oh. Oops, sorry. I mean, nothing.
Only the shadow knows.
There may be literary output coming out later this year, something to watch out for, and we'll make a big announcement about that.
Yeah, but that's not something that we talk about. So,
no, but I'm glad you glad that's but it involves some big names. We're very happy to be associated.
Well, when you know, I can always announce that in an upcoming show or add it to these show notes or something.
Yeah, will do. Will do.
Go ahead.
Never mind.
If people want to contact either one or both of you, how would they do that?
Probably the easiest way is on Facebook, I'm guessing. But if you want to shoot us an email, that's always fun. It's everybodylovesdave@gmail.com.
Or Zadi, which is ZHADI@AOL.com. Yes, I like AOL. I'm a dinosaur. I don't care. And yeah, Facebook is great. My website, which is www.danafredsti.com. My email contacts in there. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram.
And as of this year, I've got a website too, davefitzgerald.org.
Finally.
Finally.
Hat tip to Susie Box for that.
Right.
Yeah. Anything that we should cover that we haven't yet?
I do have some other books coming out this year. I contributed a chapter to a new anthology from John Loftus and Robert M. Price on mythicism.
Excellent.
And my chapter was called "Why Mythicism Matters," whether there was a Jesus or not. And I'm really proud of it. And actually, I'll be speaking at a historical Jesus conference that's put on by the Global Center for Religious Research next month. That's coming up. So I'm excited about that as well.
I've got a very gruesome short story in an anthology called Consumed, which is loosely, the book is based on the Wendigo legend, and that was a really fun story to write, and I'm very proud of that. And Jesus is not mentioned.
Very good, very good. Well, I thank you both for coming on the Phil Ferguson Show, and it was, of course, great to catch up, and hopefully somewhere later in this year, or maybe 22, we can sit down and just share a meal or a drink or something.
That would be lovely. Come visit us in Eureka.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish. I know about your move and what the hassle that is, but I would love to come out there and hang out for a few days. So maybe we'll figure out a way to do that.
All right.
Thank you both.
Give our love to Robin and the Little Fergusons.
Will do. Thank you.
The story of Joseph. Pharaoh had a dream, and this dream was interpreted by Joseph. According to this interpretation, there was to be in Egypt 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to buy all the surplus of the 7 plentiful years and store it up against the years of famine. Pharaoh appointed Joseph as his minister or agent and ordered him to buy the grain of the plentiful years. Then came the famine. The people came to the king for help. He told them to go to Joseph and do as he said. Joseph sold corn to the Egyptians until all their money was gone, until he had it all. When the money was gone, the people said, "Give us corn, and we'll give you our cattle." Joseph let them have corn until all their cattle, their horses, and their flocks had been given to him. Then the people said, "Give us corn, and we will give you our lands." So Joseph let them have corn until all their lands were gone. But the famine continued, and so the poor wretches sold themselves, and they became the servants of Pharaoh. Then Joseph gave them seed, and made an agreement with them that they should forever give 1/5 of all they raised to Pharaoh. Who enabled Joseph to interpret the dream of Pharaoh? Jehovah. Did he know at the time that Joseph would use the information thus given to rob and enslave the people of Egypt? Yes. Who produced the famine? Jehovah. It is perfectly apparent that the Jews did not think of Jehovah as the God of Egypt, the God of all the world. He was their God, and theirs alone. Other nations had gods, but Jehovah was the greatest of all. He hated other nations and other gods, and abhorred all religions except the worship of himself.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I'm so delighted you're still around. Thank you for listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Of course, if you like the show, you can go to Apple Podcast or Stitcher and leave a 5-star review. That would be much appreciated. You can also go to patreon.com/Phil and kick in a couple of dollars. Become a patron of the show for just $1 an episode. I don't do it weekly or monthly because if I skip a week or a month, I haven't skipped a month yet, but if I skip a week or two, you're not out anything. You're only contributing if I make a show. And that is a nice way to say to Phil, hey, Phil, I appreciate what you do. Each podcast can take anywhere from a couple hours, 2, 3, 4 hours, to some of the ones where I have to do a little bit more research and actually collect the numbers. Sometimes the show can take 6 to 8, maybe even 10 hours, depending on the show, but usually not that long. So there is some material work in it, and the ads, oh my God, the ads. I make a couple of dollars a month from the ads. So Patreon is really the best way that you can kick in, other than, of course, the 5-star reviews. Because if you have no money, that's fine. Don't contribute anything, but go leave a 5-star review. If you have a few bucks that you can spare, go to Patreon. And if you don't want to give it to me, go give it to some other person that is making material that you enjoy. A lot of people do this and make next to nothing. So think about that. Totally different topic. We're going to transition here. Prepare yourselves. Trump. What the fuck? I mean, really? Can we not finally get rid of this guy, for fuck's sake? I don't know. I have a few conservative friends that are still around, and I may just lose my fucking shit. This idea, like they'll throw out to me, the liberals have canceled Dr. Seuss. Okay. The company, the foundation, whatever, in charge of the copyrights of Dr. Seuss, determined that a couple of their books might have some pieces in them that are insensitive, inappropriate, especially for young readers to read and get implanted with these stereotypes or negative images of certain groups of peoples. I applaud this. They made that by a conscious choice. Of course, at the time that it happened, conservatives went out and bought all the old copies, which is hysterical because we finally found a way to get conservatives to read books that are at the appropriate level for their reading skills. Just a joke, is it? Anyway, so the company chose to do that, and you would think Republicans, as the people that really push for the rights of a business, would be most happy to say that the business can do that. It's within their rights as a person, because companies are people now, so whatever. But the new thing now is Liz Cheney, who I do not like, who is one of the most conservative of conservative nutcases on the planet, voting for things that I think are horrific, is now kind of become a little hero because she is one of only a couple of Republicans that will stand up to the tyranny of Donald Trump and his minions and say that he is a liar. What happened on January 6th when Trump's followers, minions, worshipers, devotees, I don't know what, attacked the U.S. Capitol. It was not a gathering that got a little out of hand. It wasn't just some happy-go-lucky, rowdy white folk. It was a fucking coup attempt. And it failed. I'm delighted it failed, but it only failed just barely. They were seconds away from destroying the ballots and the votings that came from each and every one of the states to be counted for the presidential election. They were chanting, "Where's Mike Pence?" They were chanting, "Where's Nancy Pelosi?" They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They didn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. They only cared if you adored Trump and if you adored his narrative. And there was this little moment of time for a couple of weeks maybe where it looked like Trump had finally gone too far, that a coup attempt finally is the point where he went too far. Everything before that, not too far. It just blows my mind. But now, a couple months later, the story of the coup, the failed coup attempt for the United States government, and if me calling it a failed coup bothers you, fuck off. I don't really care. It was a failed coup attempt. He tried to end democracy as we know it. And I thought his goose was cooked. But now virtually every Republican is going down to Mar-a-Lago in Florida, kissing his ass, and plotting their revenge and how they can take out people, how they can shame people, how they can intimidate people. What is her name? That green chick? And I would normally never ever say that about someone who's in Congress, but Majority Taylor Greene went and tried to get through the locked door for AOC, another member of the U.S. government. For shame. She should be removed from her office. She's already been removed from all of her positions within the Republican Party, but she should be removed from office, ejected from Congress, but I don't think that's going to happen. And Liz Cheney, maybe with Mitt Romney and a couple others, are the only few voices of sanity. And if they keep getting shoved to the side because Liz Cheney lost her position as the third highest ranking member of the Republican Party in the House, not the Senate, in the House. Absolutely stunning. The battle is not over, friends. I really don't want to do a whole lot of politics. I have more fun attacking religion, and maybe religion is part of why we have the modern day Republican Party. But you cannot give up. You cannot surrender. Never surrender. Never give up. Never surrender. Elections will happen again. They might happen in your area this fall. You need to pay attention to that. Now, there's going to be new House and Senate seats that are going to be voted on in a little bit over a year. Pay attention to that. If you have some spare time, find a way to volunteer. You have some money that you can spare. Help out a candidate that you like. We cannot just sit by and let this all go in the toilet. And the funny thing is, even if it goes in the toilet, I'm probably going to be okay. I'm a middle-aged, maybe past middle-aged white dude with some money. I'm going to be okay. But it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about other people. This idea of I've got mine and fuck you, which is so prominent in the Republican Party, just drives me off the fucking cliff. I hate it. I loathe it. And they do it all while carrying a cross and saying they're trying to help the poor people. No, they're not. No, they're not. A reasonable minimum wage. $15 an hour sounds like a nice place to start. In some big cities, that's still not going to be enough, by the way. But $15 an hour. Taxes on people that make millions of dollars a year. A lot of really wealthy people don't earn income. They make investments, and those investments pay capital gains, and they might have to pay 20% in tax. Not to mention all the loopholes and write-offs they take advantage of, where someone who's working a normal 9-to-5 job or 2 or 3 jobs to make enough money to get by might pay 25 to 30% tax. That's fucked up. That's wrong, and that should be fixed. Anyway, I didn't really intend to make it that long, but that's my rant. I loathe the individual named Trump. Well, in fact, all the individuals named Trump. Mary Trump might be okay, but Donald Trump, the former president of the United States of America, is still a cancer to our democracy, and he should not hold elected office. He should not be allowed to have the control, which at this point seems to be unquestioned for the entire Republican Party. So, fuck me. I'm going to end on that. Thank you for listening. I do hope to see you out there somewhere soon, maybe this fall. I'm optimistic at this point that I might be at the FFRF conference in Boston. Hope I can see you there. Until then, ciao.